Hi guys, I've had some people ask me to put out a video on going into detail regarding directionals and zones that we use during practice when we focus on high percentage tennis. This video might be a bit boring, but stick around if you are a bit confused about high percentage tennis. I'll also be going through some examples in pro matches to see if the pros are performing high percentage tennis. Maybe you guys have the feeling that the pros are just slamming winners all the time, so I'll try to visualize it for you guys to understand. This way you will also be able to analyze pro points and your own points by yourselves, which is heavily needed when trying to find out what can be done better and how we play better high percentage tennis. I'm also making this video to give my own take on how I teach high percentage play within points, and I'll also be talking about how to include directionals and zones in high percentage tennis during practice. Here are the things we will be going over in this video. They are listed in order. The first question we are asking is, what even is high percentage tennis? High percentage tennis is by definition hitting the shot or shots that gives you the best chance of winning. Alright, cool. But can't literally every shot be high percentage if I hit them well? Yes, but not every shot is equally easy to hit, and some shots might also put you in a difficult situation. I'm sure we've all seen the clip of Federer talking about the very large gap between the win percentage of matches compared to points in his career.
In the 1,526 singles matches I played in my career, I won almost 80% of those matches. Now, I have a question for you. What percentage of points do you think I won in those matches? Only 54%.
Explaining how, even though he won compared to losing so much, it was often only because he won a couple more points than his opponent. To be able to win just a bit more points than the opponent every time, Feds and everyone else has to play with odds in mind, and high percentage tennis is simply playing the shot that gives you the best odds of winning the point in the end. In short, odds being a huge factor in points is why high percentage tennis is important. Personally, when I coach high percentage tennis, I take a lot of inspiration from already existing methods and guidelines. Let's look at a couple and why I do take inspiration from them. Starting off, we are going to talk about something called the Ivan Lendl grid. This grid shows Lendl's approach to where to aim based on where you are positioned on the court. It's pretty simple, yet very effective, and is a big part of Lendl's philosophy when it comes to consistent baseline play. It allows for a very clear guideline, easy to put into practice, and also to use within actual points. The grid, being quite simple, is also very intuitive for most players. Let's go through the zones and what they mean. It's easy to understand Lendl's success when looking at the grid, because when you put it into practice, it does make a lot of sense. The color of the zone you stand in corresponds to the color of your target. Meaning, if the player stands in the C zone or the red zone, they aim in one of the corresponding C zones or red zones. Same with the B or yellow zone, and same with the A or green zones. Next up, we're going to talk about Wardlaw's directionals. Paul Wardlaw devised a system for decision making, reducing errors by following geometry. Let's go through the principles of the directionals. First, there are the inside and outside strokes, or volleys. Inside shots are shots where the ball does not cross what is known as the body line, and outside shots happen when the ball does cross the body line. The body line being the line from your body to the net, parallel to the singles line or the doubles line. Then there is the change of direction. Since the forehand and backhand are hit across the body and cross-court shots are fundamentally easier than down-the-line shots to attempt, directional advises to aim cross-court on these outside shots. In this situation, there is no change of direction. Directionals instead advises to change direction or hit down the line on inside strokes, as we still hit across the body, making it easier to go down the line. And also because we mostly hit inside shots from the middle of the court, bettering our odds even more when hitting down the line. If we do decide on change of direction on outside shots, directionals here advises to hit down the line with what is called a 90-degree change of direction, meaning to reduce errors on these down the line shots, the ball travels parallel to the singles line, or the doubles line, or the body line. If we are playing with a weapon, as Wardlaw calls it, running around the forehand to use it more because of its strength rather than in the backhand, requires the ability to hit inside forehands without change of direction, also called inside-out forehands. Next up, creating a base for high percentage principles in practice. Many, including myself, like to divide the baseline into 3 equal parts. I think this idea allows for many different ways to identify ideal zones to aim on the court. Speaking of, let's try to identify depth and angle to be able to later use them as guidelines and rules when playing high percentage tennis. First, depth. Now, depth is a pretty subjective topic, as many people have different ideas of what deep is, and sometimes balls that are softly struck might need to be very deep to actually feel deep. I personally call everything that lands a meter or two behind the service line deep, as it gives a pretty good idea of where to aim with at least a good bit of margin. We are talking about high percentage after all. Next up, identifying angle. Angle is also a very subjective topic, but again, in order to understand angle, while also keeping margin for error in mind, we are going to use the outer parts of the 3-part baseline division as a guideline for what is a relatively angled shot. We now have a court that kinda looks like a tic-tac-toe board, I hear you say. Haha, very funny, I say. I'm gonna go first. Jokes aside, now when we have a clear and, in my opinion, high percentage understanding of how to play angled and deep, we can use this to further develop more specific rules and guidelines for how to play better high percentage tennis. First, I am going to give my own take on zones on our side of the court, which we'll identify as red, yellow, and green, marked out like this, kind of like how Lendl does. I like to call these defending, or staying in the point zone, point building zone, and attacking or ending the point zone. Of course, depending on how far in the zone we stand and also what kind of shot we are hitting. More on that later. With these zones, we can easily identify the situation we find ourselves in, and from there, what exactly we should do, what intention we should have when striking the ball. I like to use these zones to coach high percentage tennis, so that players might finally refrain from slamming down the line shots from places only Christopher Columbus has discovered. Of course, there is a bit of nuance to these zones. For better players, they are often able to build the point from further back, and newer, more recreational players might need the attacking zone to be even shorter. And watching Rublev play at times makes me feel like everything I'm looking at is the green zone.
He's fine. No.
Now that we have solidified these zones on our side of the court, let us try to explore where to aim with some zones on the opponent's side of the court. Let's call these target zones. First up, a guideline or rule, or whatever you might call it, that I like to use and teach is using 3 deep zones. To identify these, we simply divide the baseline into the 3 parts and combine it with what we consider deep, and there we go. 3 large rectangular zones. To mark 2 more zones that we use for sharp angles on more offensive shots, we draw a line from the middle point of the line that divides the service boxes to both middle points of the singles lines between the service line and the baseline. Now we can connect them and we have 2 triangular zones. From what we can see now, there is also an empty triangle in the middle. Some might call this the black hole, as it is detrimental to aim there, as it gives the opponent an easy ball. Now that we have some target zones, let's talk about some cross-court and down-the-line principles, as they are important for us to understand before going forward. Number 1, cross is king. The first of the 2 options you can hit is cross-court. Cross-court offers a long list of positives, including recovery distance, net height, amount of court we are able to hit, court length, and giving the opponent outside balls. When hitting cross-court, we give our opponent the ability to also hit either cross-court back or down the line. Assuming we are striking the ball at the baseline, the opponent will be able to send us further out towards the cross-court side than the down the line side. Meaning that depending on what shot you make, you either protect yourself or you expose yourself. As such, when recovering after a down the line shot, we have to cover more ground to be bisecting the opponent's next 2 possible shots. Not only that, but hitting cross-court means that the ball crosses the net at the middle, where the net is the lowest, meaning margin for error. As we know, the hypotenuse is the longest side in a right triangle. We know the cross-court decision gives us more margin because of more court length. Hitting cross-court also assures us that the opponent hits an outside shot, which they more often than not cannot do much with other than send back a cross-court ball. Number 2, when do we actually hit down the line then? Hitting down the line is important during the right times. These include approach shots and passing shots, and for the most part times where we want to apply pressure. The good idea is to checkmark a couple of things before attempting a down the line shot. Number 1 is the opponent far out. If the opponent is far out to the side, hitting down the line hurts them and can even win us the point. Number 2, are we hitting from the middle? The closer to the middle you are, the less risks that come with hitting down the line there are. Number 3, from the green zone. As down the line is used mostly for attacking, it becomes a high percentage play to do it within the green or the attacking zone. Number 4, on inside shots. Now for combining some of these elements. The target zones we identified earlier work as possible decisions during certain situations. Meaning when hitting a shot, we should be able to identify the high percentage option in the majority of situations. So how do we identify the high percentage play? Number 1, we should look at where we are standing. The highest percentage shot you can hit is always dependent on where you are positioned when striking the ball. Meaning that before targeting any zones, we should look at if we are in our red zone, yellow zone, or green zone. Number 2, identifying target zone. Once we know where we are standing, it is time to look at the ideal target zone or zones. Let's try to find them based on our position. From the red zone, there aren't very many options other than defending. To protect ourselves the best, we are trying to hit deep, and because of our position being very far back, the ball takes more time to travel down to the opponent, meaning angle is mostly useless. Our target zone from the red zone therefore primarily consists of the middle rectangle. From the yellow zone, we don't yet have the ability to attack completely, however we do not yet need to defend ourselves either, meaning we should be building the point. This we do by having 2 target zones, the outer rectangle zones. To identify which of these 2 zones to aim for, we look at if our contact point lies on the inside of the 2 lines that divide our court. If so, both zones become target zones. However, if our contact point lies beyond our 2 lines, the cross-court rectangle becomes the primary target zone. In this zone, when building the point, depth and angle become equally important. Within the green zone, we are looking to attack. As such, we are now looking for sharper angles and more offensive targets, as they become the high percentage options. The green zone allows us the most amount of options of any zone, and as such, many different options become high percentage. Finding ourselves in the middle of the green zone, the 2 outer rectangular zones are still relevant. Likewise are now the 2 triangular zones, but also the middle triangular zone. Wait, what? I hear you say. I can literally hit anywhere I want when I'm in the green zone. But no, that's not exactly the case, because it depends on number 3. What kind of shot are we hitting? Let's start with ground strokes. For the most part, with ground strokes within the green zone, we are aiming either into the down the line rectangle or the cross-court triangle. This is only if your contact point lies on the outside of the 2 center lines. If your contact point is from the middle, let's say right here, then the 2 outer triangular zones are the high percentage options, and if you're further forward, the 2 triangles are the high percentage options, in my opinion. Again, if you are hitting ground strokes. For approach shots, the high percentage shot is the rectangular zone that is parallel to your position, as it allows for you to be bisecting once going forward. Speaking of going forward, where are the target zones on volleys? Well, it depends. The high percentage target zone on volleys you hit below the net is still the rectangular zone parallel to your position. Meanwhile, volleys we hit above the net are aimed towards the triangles. Same goes for overheads, they also should be going towards the triangles. Passing shots are aimed either at the down the line rectangle zone or the cross-court triangle zone, or the rectangle zone that corresponds to the opponent's backhand side if you are lobbing, as to not give them any easy overheads. For drop shots, aim the drop shot to be landing between the net and the bottom line of the triangles. The list goes on, but I will try to cover more during the analysis of points later on. Oh boy, what boring and conventional rules and guidelines we just went through, man. I really hate high percentage tennis because I cannot have any fun, I hear you say. Well, tennis is also a game, and in this game you need to have fun to win, and we humans are also animals who are able to recognize these patterns. As such, sometimes the high percentage play can simply be playing with variety and creativity rather than constantly playing the high percentage options laid out. Well, how do I know when to play high percentage tennis and when to play with variety and creativity, you ask? A good rule to follow in regards to this is red light, yellow light, and green light points. Basically, the more ahead you are in score, the more variety and creativity you can allow yourself to play with, and the more behind you are in score, the more high percentage you should be playing. Now for some drills and examples. To better practice and understand the principles of depth and angle, we can utilize some very simple drills. Let's go with depth first. Start by marking the line that separates deep and not deep, and simply play while only aiming for the deep target zone. This drill can be done by feeding or playing. Now for angle. Start by dividing the court into two lines, creating the three target zones, and simply play, only aiming for the two outer target zones. This drill can also be done through feeding or playing. For beginners trying to learn, or intermediate players trying to practice, these are simple and effective drills. For more experienced players who need to understand the target zones, we can have the players play inside a certain zone, then simply playing out only the corresponding target zones. For example, for the red zone, both players will stay a bit further behind the baseline and simply only aim for the middle rectangular zone. Players will rally like this. This can be done for the yellow zone too. Players will attempt to put the ball into the cross-court target zones, and eventually, if one of the previously mentioned down-the-line principles can be checkmarked, for example, is the ball a short ball, a down-the-line shot is now allowed. In other words, players will simply rally within the yellow zone while looking for the high percentage target zone. For the green zone, one player can be approaching, aiming for the down-the-line target zone, and then the point can be played from there with the intention of both players to hit the high percentage target zones. A feeding drill for volleys I like to use is that players will be fed a low volley. This volley is a low volley and can be hit from anywhere along the service line. This low volley is then hit deep into the target zone parallel to the player's position. The player then moves forward and gets a high volley, which they can then put away into either of the triangles, depending on whether it is an inside or outside volley. These are, however, just a couple of drills and examples we can use to improve our high percentage tennis, and I would definitely like to hear your takes on development of this in the comments. Now for some pro point analysis. Let's look at the pros to see if they actually play high percentage tennis and what it means for them to do so. First, I'm going to go through some points from Rafa and Novak from the 2012 Australian Open final, which in my opinion is one of the best matches ever played. It is worth to mention that I won't be looking at the serve and returns, as the things we have gone through in this video mostly applies to what happens within points after serve and return. Let's look at the first point.
On the line.
Now let's analyze it. And point is in play. Rafa is definitely finding himself in a red zone situation because he's pushed very far out. In this case, his target zone is the middle rectangular target zone. Let's see what he goes for. He does actually hit it. Very nice. But because of the backspin, it doesn't really land deep enough. Djokovic now has an inside forehand within the green zone. Definitely a position you want to be in. Because he is standing in the middle, his two target zones lie in either of the outer rectangular zones. If Djokovic, however, plans to approach and come forward after the shot, the high percentage play would be to go for the target zone parallel to his position, being the down-the-line rectangle. And oh boy, we have hit jackpot. Djokovic has taken a very high percentage decision. Nadal, finding himself in a passing shot situation, either has the choice, as previously mentioned, to go cross-court triangle or down-the-line rectangle, or of course lob. Let's see what he does. He goes cross-court triangle. Nice. Another high percentage play here. Djokovic now has gotten a low volley, and the high percentage play for lower volleys would be to aim for the rectangular zone parallel to his position. Let's see what he does.
On the line.
And there we go. As you can see, pretty much every single shot within this point was based on high percentage decision making. Very nice. In this next point, Rafa has an inside forehand from the yellow, or we can also say, I would say more red zone. Target zones are now the two outer rectangular zones if he's feeling ambitious, of course if he's finding himself in a yellow zone, or in the middle zone if he's holding back a bit and of course decides that he's in the red zone. He does go for the middle target zone, probably a good idea since, let's be honest, he did find himself in more of a red zone situation. Djokovic gets a standard outside forehand, and Rafa is bisecting pretty well here, so Djokovic should put this ball into the cross-court rectangular target zone, which he does. Rafa now goes for a backhand slice, yellow zone. His target zone is still, in my opinion, the cross-court rectangle. It does, however, land in the down-the-line rectangle. Because of this decision, Djokovic now has secured himself a free inside forehand, and I think we all know who has the upper hand in the point by now. It's Djokovic. With this inside forehand, he can now choose between the two outer rectangular zones as he's standing in the yellow zone, which he does. Rafa now finds himself in the red zone and should aim for the middle rectangle. He does hit cross court, which is a pretty good outcome for him, because it means he has less recovery distance, and Djokovic now loses the angle he would have had into Nadal's open court if Nadal had not put this ball as cross court as he did. Nevertheless, Djokovic now has the option of going cross court rectangle, but wait, a down the line principle is present. Nadal is far out, and Djokovic does go for the down the line rectangular zone. Nadal, finding himself in a red zone situation, should be going middle rectangle, and he does. Djokovic now has another inside forehand from the yellow zone, meaning his target zones now are the outer triangles, and he chooses the inside in rectangle. Nadal is now in the yellow zone and far out to the side, meaning the high percentage play here is to go cross court target zone, which he hits pretty nicely. Djokovic can now go either cross court back, but Nadal is pretty far out, so instead of only having the cross court option as his only high percentage play, he now has both the cross and the line target zones as options he can go for. And he does go line. Nadal now has a yellow zone forehand. The high percentage play here is to go cross court rectangle. He does, however, not hit that, and if you ask me, this is the moment exactly where Nadal lost the point. Djokovic now has a yellow zone inside forehand, and yet again, for free, pretty much can now choose between the two outer target zones, which he again does. Nadal now has a yellow zone outside forehand, and no down the line principle can be checkmarked. Nadal should be going cross court rectangle on this one. He does try to do that, but it lands kinda middle, and Djokovic gets another yellow zone inside forehand for free. He can now yet again choose either of the outer target zones, which he does, and he wins the point. Again, pretty much every shot that these players are making, we have previously identified as high percentage. Even though Nadal did have a high percentage intention with some of these shots, he did, however, not actually hit these zones that would make the shots high percentage. And in my opinion, that's why he lost the point.
Oh. Unbelievable.
7 return is done. The rally is in play. Djokovic starts out with an inside forehand. His target zones are now the two outer rectangles. Nadal now has a forehand from the yellow zone. Djokovic is bisecting pretty well, so Nadal's only high percentage target zone is the cross-court rectangle. Nice. Now Djokovic has a yellow zone backhand. Of course, he can hit this one cross-court if he wants to. However, we can checkmark that Nadal is very far out, so that gives Djokovic two high percentage target zone options, which he does hit. Very nice. We can see that Nadal is going to go ahead and slice. His target zone, however, is still the cross-court rectangle, in my opinion. And oh boy, Rafa, you've just exposed yourself because you hit down the line without checkmarking our down the line rules. However, this isn't as big of a deal as you might think. Because Rafa sliced this ball, it gives him a lot of time to get back into the correct position. Nevertheless, Djokovic gets a yellow zone backhand, and the cross-court target zone becomes the high percentage play, which he does not actually hit, giving Rafa a yellow zone forehand from the middle of the court. Checkmarking the line principles, we see that Nadal is hitting from the middle, meaning that his target zones become the outer rectangles, both of them. He chooses the down the line one. Djokovic now has an outside yellow zone forehand, and so the high percentage option becomes the cross-court rectangular target zone. He fails to hit the target zone, and so Nadal gets an inside forehand. With this yellow zone inside forehand, Nadal can now choose between both rectangular target zones, which he does. Djokovic now again has an outside forehand, meaning the high percentage option is the cross-court rectangle. And this time he actually does hit it, forcing Nadal to hit an outside backhand. The high percentage option for Nadal here is the cross-court rectangle, which he does hit. Djokovic, now being in a red zone position, now only has one high percentage option, the middle rectangle. And he actually does make this the goal for a reason, I guess. Inside forehand for Nadal in the yellow zone, meaning both rectangles are high percentage options. He makes it, and Djokovic gets an outside forehand. We can't really checkmark any down the line principles, so the only high percentage option here is cross-court rectangle, which he hits. Nadal now has a red zone forehand, and this one should just go back to the middle rectangle, which he almost hits. Djokovic now has an outside backhand from the yellow zone. His target zone is now the cross-court rectangle, which he does hit. Very nice. Nadal now finds himself in a red or yellow zone. I don't really know. Red, yellow, something like that zone situation. And so if he's feeling unsure, he should just go middle rectangle. If he's feeling ambitious, he should hit this one cross-court back. And just to make it clear, there are absolutely no down the line principles present that we can checkmark. So it would be stupid to... Well, I guess Nadal was indeed feeling a bit stupid. This was not a very high percentage play at all. And now he has exposed himself, as we have previously solidified. Djokovic, high percentage play here is to go cross-court rectangle, which he does hit. Nadal's previous down the line shot has now put him in this pickle of a red zone situation. His high percentage shot from the red zone is the middle rectangle, but despite a good attempt he fails to hit it, and from here Djokovic holds all the cards. He can go cross-court triangle, he can go down the line rectangle, and he can drop shot if he wants, which he actually ends up doing. Only one low percentage decision was all that was needed from Nadal for Djokovic to get the upper hand in this point. Very interesting.